Welcome to Mysterious Library on the Untold Radio Network. Tonight, myself and Jason McLean are taking a little venture into the audio-visual wing of the library to consider a trilogy of documentary films from paranormal investigator Chad Caleck SIR NOFACE, Two-Face the Grey, and Phantom Rider. What begins in the first documentary as an investigation into an alleged video of a full-body apparition filmed at Sydney, Australia's Cockatoo Island, spirals by the second film into suspicions that the figure captured on the video is actually a grey extraterrestrial. And then it segues into this spiraling conspiracy theory about the military industrial complex by the third film. So join us on this very twisted, strange journey tonight down the alien conspiracy rabbit hole.
And with that, we are live. Howdy.
Howdy, Jason. How was your Halloween?
It was good. Spent most of it on air, actually.
Oh,
But
wow.
I gotta walk in with the dog and the wife, and outside of that, just mostly I was spending on air, doing the podcast thing. How about yourself?
Well, I always love the spooky season, so I trick-or-treated with my daughter and took her to a number of Halloween events in the last week, but somewhere along the line, I got tricked as well as treated because I've been given a gift I didn't want, which is some god-awful virus. I feel like I've gone 10 rounds with Muhammad Ali in his prime at the moment.
Well, I imagine that would actually be a little different. However, I was just like that like last Monday, so I think it's going around. It's definitely a thing.
Oh, yeah, I'm just happy to be here anyway. I can get through it, and there's nothing a bit of cold medication can't fix.
That's very, very true. Yeah, no, it's been an interesting week, so all I can say. Nothing, sadly, nothing like really paranormal, just all the just life stuff, right? Kind of boring, normal stuff.
Well, it's normal. I guess we're on the brink of World War III and diesel fuel's running out and the Mississippi River's running dry. I don't know about that last part, but I'm thinking of all the apocalyptic tropes out there in popular culture. Strange times.
It is. So here's the funny thing, right? The whole Mississippi River thing. It is true, sort of, but it was also true literally back in 1980. Like, this is something that happens, again, like all these things are cyclical. But yeah, I mean, we got some. I mean, yeah, weird stuff that is that's less fun than what we're going to talk about tonight.
Well, tonight's films, they spiral into the apocalyptic as well, but we'll get to that eventually.
Yeah, they do. They take a hard left turn into that, and it was like, all right, but like I said, we'll talk about that here in a little bit. Yes, there is still Chick-fil-A. They saw my cup. Yes, took my daughter to Chick-fil-A. Although I've replaced it with an HEB drink.
Oh. Well, there you go.
And that's only going to mean something to the Texans. So, which is
That's
okay.
like isn't that a generic soda or something?
So here's the thing. So HEB, well, okay, so yes and no. So HEB is a supermarket brand here in Texas, right? And they specialize in, I mean, they carry, it's a normal super, grocery store, but they also have their own HEB brand products, sort of like Great Value does for Walmart, right? And yeah, I would argue most of them are actually better than the normal generic thing.
Oh,
So
that's good.
yeah, it's again, I love HEB. I'm glad to have to walk into Walmart way less often than I have to.
Well, you got your HGB to drink
Mhm.
while you watch the world end on your lawn chair
That's my
in the
plan.
suburbs of Texas, wherever you're at. Yeah, I guess that's everybody's
Yeah,
plan. They can't do much else.
exactly. And technically, like that's thing is technically I'm not in a suburb. Like
I'm
I'm
not
not out
sure.
in
I
the
was
middle
just
of nowhere.
guessing. I
Oh
don't
yeah, no,
actually
no, no.
know.
I'm not in a suburb. I'm technically far enough out, but I'm still part of the DFW. Although that being said, we've gotten bigger since I moved here, and I'm like, I kind of need to move further out.
Well,
Get a
yeah,
little.
I think today it's always better to be away from people, but I'm feeling particularly pessimistic tonight because of my ill health. So I'm just like the world's ending. All you can do is drink your soda and watch it on your lawn chair.
Get off my lawn, kids.
Exactly. That's what I'm like
Yeah.
tonight. But you know what? Talking about these films is going to spark me up, if for no other reason, to let me spill some vitriol all over them, I suppose.
Hey, you know what? Sometimes, sometimes you just gotta chuck a water balloon at people. Like I actually thought about that last night. I was in a bit of a mood because like my window is right here. Like if you watch the other shows, you can see that I've got a window right here. I'm on the second floor. Like, I was sitting there thinking the entire time, like, if I had some water balloons, I could just, you know, drive the
We
kids off the lawn.
we used to do that from high rises. I'm sure that's not safe. When my brother and I would go on holiday to Surfers Paradise, which is like, I don't know, it's like a Florida in Australia. You'd be on high rises on the beach or along a river or something in the state above New South Wales, Queensland. Beautiful part of the world. But we would throw water balloons at people, 15 stories below. I mean, we were little boys, but
That was
if you did that these days, the police would be called. In those days, people would just shake their fists at you, that'd be it.
at 15 stories, I think police should have been called. Like
Maybe.
that's or at
Yeah.
least gotten your butts handed to you a couple times. Like that's 15 stories. That's a bit excessive.
Yeah, we were brats then again.
But
It is a time for tricks and treats still, or I guess that ended.
yeah.
It ended last. I just want to say too, before I start spilling vitriol, because I will. I run film festivals and I'm very sympathetic to independent films. I'll say
Mhm.
this much. I would have
Yep.
screened any of these films at the festival I run because there's an audience for them who enjoys this type of content. I don't just
Mhm.
screen things that I myself personally agree with the theories or like. I can imagine a cinema audience enjoying this film. I mean, there's clearly a market for it. These films
Oh
did
yeah,
very
yeah.
well. And so I'm just before I open up on it, at a professional film festival level, yeah,
Mhm.
I'd screen one of these films if it was. In fact, they've got we'll get to it later. There's meant to be a new one coming out.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm
Yeah.
kind of interested to see where they go with it,
Mhm.
if for no other reason, just to see where the monkeys go in this particular train wreck. So, I mean, okay, we're
Let's
gonna
start
need
the
to talk
fir
about the
Yeah, let's
yeah.
start the first film maybe, I thought. It's up to you.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, no, exactly. So, I mean, we definitely need to start with the content, but I do need to mention one thing. Since this is our first documentary, right? We thus far we've only done articles and books, and this is our first foray into the film category, which I think we're gonna do a little bit more often. I have to admit, I was pleasantly surprised in the Mysterious Libraries film section. It's very they have those nice leather reclining seats, right? They're heated and the popcorn is amazing, and they were very polite. I normally I'm ducking and dodging and okay, yeah, last week I may have gone into Mordor, even though they were perfectly nice goblins. I'm just saying, I go and I see a goblin, I'm gonna kick it. But the elves that run the cinema they're very good at, like, they took some real pride in this. Like the floors weren't sticky, right? They had, the popcorn was on point. They had the yellow salt, right? Like that yellow salt that you put. And here's where it got even better. They had the actual, like, instead of the bags, they had the actual, like, the old school paper cardboard. They weren't cardboard. They were like the stiff paper, the barrels, and they'd put the yellow salt halfway in. They'd shake it up, then they'd fill it up, and then they'd shake it some more. I handed to him the Mysterious Library Cinema. I may find myself sneaking down in there a little more often. That's all I'm
Well,
gonna say.
they're all frustrated directors and actors, so they're all hoping for their big break when some mogul comes in to watch something. So they're on their best behavior. For all they knew, you might have
Yeah.
been, you might have come straight from Lionsgate to check something out.
Well, I mean, I may have mentioned one or two things.
There you go. Clever.
Yeah, that's a good point. Good point. And it explains why they kept handing me their cards.
There you go.
Yeah, they all every single one of them. They had little. I mean, I threw them all away when I left, but yeah, I mean that's a good point. I hadn't thought of that.
It's a motive.
Okay, well, I got to
their
keep up the
kindness.
charade now. Ooh, it's gonna be it's gonna be awkward when they find out.
I wouldn't want to be you when they find out. Or I wouldn't want to be in that cinema when they find out.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, I am always armed, so
That's a good idea, particularly in the library.
Oh yeah. Oh well, I had a couple of hatchets with me this time because, well, okay, sure. Last time I figured the goblins would be a little miffed about what happened last time, so they, maybe one's hanging around, but no, everyone's on their best behavior. I mean, it's going to come to an end eventually, but see, Dwayne, that's my point. That's my point. No, perfect popcorn. Perfect popcorn.
Exactly.
So I think okay.
Do you want to go into SIR NoFace just to kind of
yes,
lay that? Yeah,
we do.
Because there's a big shift between the first movie and the next two.
There is, but there is, however, from an aesthetic, I think we need to address the aesthetics first.
Okay. I'm not going to be as cruel about the aesthetics as I could be. Again, indie film
good.
and everything else.
I will.
You can be the one cruel about the aesthetics.
Okay, and again, preference this is what I'm about to say on the aesthetics is purely out of love, sort of. But
Hang
again,
on. Purely out of love, sort of. Purely out of love, sort of. Purely out of love, sort of. Purely out of love, sort of.
Okay, if you haven't seen it, that's not going to make any sense. But that's my number one thing right there. Like, overall, the aesthetics are kind of fine. Like, there's nothing overly offensive except that right there. The echoing thing it's a good trick if used very sparingly, like 2 or 3 times. I believe in the rule of 3. I really, really do. And if you space them out and you save them for the right moment, you really can, like that echo. And then he bought the coffee. Like, you really can sell that, and it's great. But if you've ever watched the original Dr. No with Sean Connery, and they bust out the theme song every 10 seconds, you know what I mean? It's like, hey, Sean Connery's getting into a car. Da-na, da-na, na-na-na. He's getting coffee. Da-na, da-da, na-na-na. He's staring at the sea. Da-na. You're like, okay, could you just wait on the music? Every 2 minutes, this film had the echo. And that's when I got the call.
Well, it's not even call. It's that's when I got the call. That's when I got the call.
That's when I got the call. Yeah, exactly. That's when I got the call. And again, if you it sparingly at the appropriate moment, any echo can be like, and then she found the rabbit. She found the rabbit. Like, yeah, that could be cool. But oh my gosh, the first 3 minutes into the film, I'm like, oh, I don't like where this is going with this echo. 5 minutes into it, I'm like, I'm not doing this. And then I just, out of pure spite, finished the first film. Guys, again, I mean this in all love, in all sincerity. Please, for the love of all that is good in the universe, not everything needs an echo. Save it. Just save it, please. I swear to you, it will work. Everything else aesthetically is fine about this. Just no. Kill that. Oh my gosh. I
Yeah,
swear it was fierce fight.
technically it is frustrating. The other thing that I would give as constructive criticism to
Yes.
change going forward, to be kind, is they often put like not subtitles, but text on screen to describe something, and it's very small and it's very fast. Now, I'm a
Yeah.
fast reader. I shouldn't have to be
Yeah.
pausing to rewind to catch something and make my screen big to
Yeah.
see it. I think that's problematic as well. And I'm
Yeah.
obviously nobody's mentioned that because that's something which is an easy fix. But I hope going forward that technique's
Yeah.
changed because it just may.
Yeah.
I don't want to have to rewind to see what the point was on the screen again and again and again. I don't normally have to do
Right.
that in any kind of text-driven documentary, so I shouldn't
Yeah.
have to do it here either.
Yeah, that's a great point. I found that less frustrating only because I think because I'm a very visual for some reason the echo, the continuous, ubiquitous, omnipresent echo bothered me so much, like everything else, you know. But Dwayne, that's the whole point is if you're in a canyon, you can at least avoid it. You know, you have to scream. This thing was just it was like every other sentence. I just again, I mean this out of all love because again, everything else about the film from an aesthetic point again, to Dean's point, yes, bigger text, just a little bit slower. Again, friendly advice. I'm just saying the echo at first, like the first time you used the echo, I was like, okay, that's cool. I like what you're doing. I see what you're doing here. It was the fifth time that I realized we had a problem, you know.
And it goes for the whole 3 films as
All
well.
three,
It's just
all
the
of
first one.
them,
But maybe we
all
should
of
because
them.
we aren't really a review show as much as we
Yeah,
talk about content and ideas. And
right.
I think the most important part of that first movie, the whole gimmick of that first movie, is that there was allegedly
Hmm.
video that they show of a captured full body apparition, they call it, supposedly of a
Yep.
ghost peeking around the corner in a
Yeah.
building on Cockatoo Island in Sydney Harbour, which this I think it's the Western Sydney Paranormal
Yeah.
Investigator Team, whatever they're called, the ones that
Hmm.
Chad Caleck, the American, goes to
Yeah.
visit. Supposedly captured there. That's really, I suppose, the meat of the first
Hmm.
film is because
Right.
Caleck's whole point is this is this is proof we finally have video proof of the supernatural.
Yeah.
Now it's video proof of something. I'm not sure it's video proof of the supernatural. I mean, there's for those of you who haven't seen the film, there's a very grainy camera. I guess it's on, night camera capture mode or
Yeah.
something. And they leave a camera
Hmm.
in a room for, I don't know, 10 hours just rolling. And then when they check it, eventually they find this
Hmm.
6-second, maybe 3-second bit of this little figure peeking around a door quickly and peeking back. And
Yeah.
despite the fact that they're saying it's a full body apparition and a ghost, they're suggesting SIR NoFace is meant to be an officer who lived once on Cockatoo Island. And then somebody
Hmm.
else says, well, this is like a little boy because we've seen little boys here, a little boy ghost here before. But the point is, anybody who watches this, the first thing they're going to think is this thing looks like a gray extraterrestrial. They never say it in the first movie, but
Right.
there's no doubt that this thing looks like a gray extraterrestrial. So the
Yeah.
first film's only point is, and they have other things of lights flashing that they've captured and these other
Yeah.
ideas. But the main point is the main proof of that movie is a supposedly full body ghostly apparition.
Yeah.
That's the point of the movie. So maybe we can start by critiquing that first, or
Right.
saying
No,
what we think
and I
about
think
it.
I think that's fair. I mean, okay. Everything else, okay. I want to put the apparition itself to the side for just a second. I would suggest there's really nothing about the rest of the film, the context, all the rest of it as far as content goes. It is the same it is like every other ghost show or movie you've ever seen, right? Again, content wise. Again, not even talking aesthetics or anything, just from the content wise, there's nothing really new about what about it. It's like every Ghost Hunters episode you've ever seen in your life.
I will
That's it.
just quickly say, because I should give credit where it's due. There's
Yeah.
a clever device where I was hoping it was going to actually
Mhm.
go in that direction, but I knew it wouldn't because I knew there were 3 movies. But maybe they watched it the first time, where
Yeah.
Chad spends a lot of time allegedly trying to prove that these people are BSing him. So he builds his
Right.
case on two facts: that the main Australian investigator, a chap called Craig Powell, told him that he
Mhm.
played for a major rugby league team in Australia, and then he found out he didn't really. So he's like, he lied to me about rugby. And another point when he asks him, we're going to get this analyzed by a top CGI expert to see if it's
Yeah.
CGI. Craig says, I'd love you to do that. I don't know anybody in the CGI industry. And Chad goes, but they have an opening intro to their own little ghost hunting show, which is clearly well done
Right.
in CGI. So he's lied to me these two times, so I know he's lying to me now. And he does all this investigation, and then at the end, he this is total spoilers, but we're talking about it, so we might as well. At the end, he goes, "Oh no, Craig really did play for that team. He just got injured and he never went on field, so that wasn't a lie. Oh, and he didn't actually know any CGI people because that was just a template that he bought and he ran through After Effects and just put in his own titling. It was pre-made. So he never lied to me. All this time
Yeah.
I was thought he was. So if he didn't lie to me about that, he
Yeah.
must be telling the truth about this not grey extraterrestrial. Then it's full
Right.
body apparition. So
Yeah.
it's kind of this straw man they set up. And the great thing is, you think these people are clearly BSing you, Chad, and you're going to find out this is wonderful. We never see this in
Yeah.
paranormal. But of course, at the end, he's like, because they didn't lie to me about the football and the CGI, they weren't lying to me at all about anything. He was always a legitimate guy. And I'm like, gosh, that's the biggest straw man I've ever seen set up in a documentary.
Yeah. No, okay. So that was exactly where I was going. Like I said, it's like every other paranormal thing, but that was the one thing that got me. It's like, because you're right. There's an interesting setup, right? The idea, it's like, hey, hold on. There seems to be some inconsistencies here in the other peripheral stuff. Then that gives me and it's like, okay, so you're like you said, it's a setup for something really interesting but the payoff is, oh, but everything's fine. And you're like, oh, okay. I mean, it feels like those, like you said, the payoff for that wasn't really there. And it's at the end. It just, that whole thing felt really forced.
Mhm.
Okay. The whole movie, a lot of these movies all feel really forced.
In a way, it's clever. In fairness to that, I think the first
Yeah.
film's the cleverest of the three because you
Yeah.
are on this journey with Chad where
Yeah.
he's trying, to set them up and prove that they're BSing him. But yeah, the final payoff at the end is that was just a straw man. Those two things why you didn't
Mhm.
trust them, and now you've proved that that's not. They weren't lying to you about those two things, so they must be telling you the truth about everything else, which of
Yeah.
course is just the biggest logical fallacy you can possibly imagine. Because it doesn't mean that
Yeah.
the real money, the real meat in the sandwich is real meat because a couple of incidental things were true. But maybe we should focus in on the figure for a moment because that's what's so interesting.
Right.
That's the meat of the
Yeah.
sandwich,
Oh,
the
exactly.
apparition that's seen in the doorway for a few seconds. What were your
Yeah.
thoughts
No.
on that?
Okay. Yeah, because I knew we were basically gonna, really set up shop on this one for a while. So I kind of wanted to get the other stuff out of the way, particularly for the first one. I've literally for a week been trying to figure out. Hey, thanks, Joe. Um, how to very prop. And here's the thing: I've done a review of this before, um, and yet I still am. Okay, omitting the other two films in their entirety. At no point did I ever think this to me looked like a full manifested. Wow. I thought you were the sick one. Manifested entity. It always to me looked like a puppet. And again, let me preface this with I am definitely not as much into the paranormal overall, only because as far as I'm concerned, if you can put it on that side of the veil, I'm out because we ain't got the Spookatron 5000, right? Patent pending. Um, and so it always kind of to me, there was nothing that looked organic about it, but I guess the idea is that it's not supposed to be, it's an entity. So, you know, okay. My problem is as soon as I saw it, at no point did I think this was a manifested supernatural entity. It looked like a gray alien or a puppet of a gray alien. That's what it looked like to me. I mean, immediately. And I think that was my biggest problem is omitting if you ignore the idea that these other things existed, like the other films, when you just saw this first one, you'd be like, that looks like a gray. I mean, it just does. Like, at no point was I ever thinking ghost with this, right? But that's my bias, right? I'm willing to say that's probably my bias speaking on this one just because of what I'm more familiar with, what I'm more into, as far as my, my
Mhm.
work. So I will happily say that may just be my bias.
But when they show it though, in the second film, they go, "Well, what we didn't say in the first one was when we started showing this film around,
Mhm,
all the audience always said it looks like a gray extraterrestrial, so much so that I used to have to introduce it
mhm.
and say, 'What do you think this looks like?' And the whole audience go, 'An alien.' And I go, 'That's right, an alien.' So
Yeah,
it almost feels like, and I have no idea. This is something you can't prove. This is all speculation. Almost feels like completing that film, they knew they had something that looked like a gray, but they wanted to see how it would be picked up and discovered by other people."
right. Okay. And like you said, speculation, and I'm not necessarily assuming ill intent, okay? Just
And by the
let
way, I don't think we can
yeah.
assume ill intent because if there's a hoax, and I'm almost certain there was, I can't tell who was the hoaxer. I can't tell if it was the filmmaker. I can't tell
Right.
if it was the investigative team. I can't tell if it was somebody at Cockatoo Island on the staff hoaxing them
Mhm.
or somebody who was camping at Cockatoo Island hoaxing them. But that thing, I
Yeah.
have no doubt, is some kind of mannequin. And the big proof, just while we're staying there just for a second, the reason it's so funny, what makes it look like a mannequin, they try to spin in that first movie that this thing doesn't move like a human. Look how its arm swings when it comes back. You know what
Yeah.
that arm is? That's inertia. They stick out a puppet thing and its arms loose, so it kind of swings weirdly and then swings
It
back in.
it looks yeah, I mean, it looks like someone took this thing and goes, "Choo, choo," like, that's it.
Yeah.
And again,
And again, that's my
it
opinion. Maybe it's a real gray extraterrestrial running around in Cockatoo Island. I find it difficult to believe.
well, hold on, we'll come back to that because there is a legitimately interesting sort of twist to the whole thing that makes the potential hoaxer somebody new, right? Like, it's not just one of the people, like, there is a legitimate reason to think that perhaps it isn't the filmmakers, it's not this other paranormal group, or so there may literally be there is a legitimate reason, and it ties into the rest of
Mhm,
a lot of things we've
mhm.
talked about in the show. So we'll come back to that because that's really middle
Well,
to
that's a good
second into
yeah,
third film.
that's a good point
First.
because they even themselves suggested something else in
Mhm.
fairness. So, yeah, we'll come back to that.
Yeah. So again, as far as the first film is concerned, and then 'cause, it's easier to talk about them all in sort of a group, but as far as that first film, yeah, I again, I am not assuming ill intent. I just can't believe that they themselves, before when they wrapped up the first film, didn't think that was a gray alien. I just can't in my head. I can't wrap my brain around the fact like, yep, that's the spirit of some dude or a kid or whatever, a cockatoo. Um, it's like I can't wrap my brain around that because it's such an obvious jump
Mhm.
because that's what it looks like. That I have the very distinct feeling that the second movie was all like, as soon as they saw it, they're like, "Okay, I bet you we can get another movie out of this." Okay? And that, like I said, I don't wanna add I just don't want to assume ill intent, unless I have reason to believe it, right? I don't want to assume that. I just have a really difficult time thinking that they didn't immediately look at that and say, "Hey, this really should take us in a completely different direction. Let's say that for another film." That's that's my problem, right? Is I cannot believe that didn't happen. Now again, that's me. I'm a cynic. I've been burned more than once by people, so I probably am willing to go to, my brain's probably way more willing to jump to sinister motives than that I again, I freely admit that's my bad. That's on me. I'm not I don't want to assume ill intent on their case, but that's one of my big problems. I just can't believe they didn't say, on that first movie, uh, "That's gray." That's my
W
problem.
well, in fairness to your suspicion and your trend to think there was, perhaps a conspiracy is the wrong word, but an intentional withholding of what they suspected it was, the whole gist of the films from about halfway through the second film through the third are very suspicious and conspiratorial themselves.
Right.
And so maybe we can segue into the second, because by the
Yeah.
second, it
Yeah.
starts with them saying what I said a minute ago, that a few of them suspected it was a gray alien anyway, and then audiences started saying this
Yeah.
is a gray alien. And
Mhm.
then from that, it spirals into an X-Files level
Oh, yeah.
conspiracy theory, where you have a massive
Mhm.
component of the second film, just stock footage,
Yes.
as they talk about the theories that have been handed to them, I think by a couple pieces. There's a tattooed faced man who
Yes.
approaches Chad
Mhm.
when they're doing one of the screenings and gives him this folder of all this ET information,
Right.
supposed ET information. And then he gets a series of emails from somebody whose I
Yeah.
suppose pseudonym is it Daniel David Skyfall, about
Yeah.
this, and between these two, there's this elaborate conspiracy theory, which dates back to pre-World War II, and that there were
Mhm.
greys and tall bronze aliens in Antarctica, and then going forward, the development of, secret weapons by the Nazis get picked up by the US government, and then they're shooting down flying saucers and yada yada. It basically
Mhm.
becomes a kind of X-Filesy thing. And it has a
Right.
few extra things thrown
Yeah.
into the mix, like
Well,
there,
yeah, and that's a great point, because it does spiral very quickly into this almost an episode of the X-Files, including mysterious. They aren't presented as the traditional Men in Black with the suits and the hats, but
same thing, buddy.
essentially
Yeah.
Men in Black, like essentially these governmental who apparently move faster than normal. So there's that weirdness sort of built into that story as well, about these people saying, hey, you can't make this film, you can't release this film. And so there is this sort of Men in Black element to that second film. I can't remember how much of it bleeds in. I think it bleeds into the third one, including. Okay, so for the rest of the film, or for the rest of this episode, we should probably just the second and third films just as one entity.
Yeah, they can sit
Yeah.
together. I think
Yeah.
the second is far clearly an extension of the third, is far more clearly an extension of the second. By the
Right.
time you're in the third film, they're not even talking really. They mentioned the footage of Sir No Face a couple times, but it's not being shown to you every 2 minutes on repeat like it was
Right.
was in the first film. So
Yeah.
eventually the conspiracy becomes more important than the footage.
Mhm.
The only reason the footage remains important is because, as I think Chad says in the second film, there's a conspiracy. It's himself and Craig Powell, the Australian investigator, who are the most likely able to blow it out of the water, because they've got this footage of an alien, or a fake alien,
Yeah.
as we'll get to in a minute, on Cockatoo Island. And we've got all the information from the tattoo-faced man, and we've got all the information from Daniel David Skyfall. So we're the two people that are the biggest. I don't think he actually uses that term exactly, but it's essentially what it is. We're the two
Right.
people that can blow this global military industrialist, old, energy monopolist conspiracy out of the water. So
Yeah.
that's the only reason it's mentioned, because supposedly it's evidence for this conspiracy,
Right.
the footage, but we don't see it all
Yeah.
the time. So yeah, it bleeds into
Yeah.
the background. So now we can transition into the second and third and talk about
Right. It's
in
sort
the
of
same way.
its own thing. Yeah. Because I mean, it basically is. So there's this Men in Black element. Like you said, there's these two people who are providing information. Again, for the sake of this conversation, I am going to believe that the encounters with the Men in Black are real. Again, because like they aren't the traditional sort of 1950s Men in Black, but they're just sort of dressed like normal people, but they just seem weird, and they, again, etc. And I'm going to believe that they are really being presented this information by two people that they are not like. I'm going to present for the rest of this conversation, I'm going to speak as if I think that the filmmakers are reporting what is happening to them in real, and they are not trying to hoax anything. Okay. Because I think it would be a very easy argument for someone to say, y'all are making all of this crap up, and this is all BS, and you're just spinning tails. And I think that's an easy way out. I don't want to do that at least for the sake of this conversation. I'm going to work as if they are being honest about what is coming to them.
Yeah, and
It doesn't
I
mean
think
the
that's
information's accurate.
I think that's a valid approach. I think,
Yeah.
and it's worth mentioning, while we can assume, or while we can give the benefit of the doubt to the filmmakers, it's important to mention that this, admittedly, the last film was made in 2020 when Trump was still president, but he asks his
Mhm.
email contact, Daniel David Skyfall, if you're not going to come forward, I need some kind of proof from you to
Yeah.
tell me so I know that this is all true. And then he lays out, it goes for about 15 minutes in the third film or 10 minutes in the third film. He lays out
Right.
some predictions, and he makes a big deal that all these predictions are dead on, and now he really wants to know who Daniel David Skyfall is. All of the predictions were all just total BS, except the first one. The first prediction was that he predicted Daniel David Skyfall in the emails that he sent to Chad Caleck that there would be more mainstream media coverage of UFOs and military confirmation in an email that he sent to Chad on December 29, 2018. Now that's true, but the big New York Times story had already blown up well over a year before that. There was already plenty of media coverage. So it's like, well, if there was more, yeah, maybe, but that wasn't a big brainer. Where it all starts to fall apart is his second prediction that Trump was selected by the military industrial complex, which is so laughable when one thinks about the problems that Trump had with some intelligence agencies, and that he'd been selected to run for 2 terms, that the impeachment would fail because the whole reason it would fail is he'd already been selected to be president for 2 terms. Now, we all know that fell apart. He definitely wasn't a 2-term president. In fact, somebody, I think, could put a very worthwhile argument forward that Trump was not liked by the establishment at all, and that's the reason that he was impeached in the first place, and why his bid for a second term fell apart. But then he goes on to say he'd been chosen by the energy elite, is the term that he uses, and the military industrial complex had chosen Trump to announce UFO disclosure. Now, we know that didn't happen. Trump never announced UFO disclosure. There was also this prediction that there would be war in the Middle East, and that will usher in, which we'll get to in a minute, the details of this, but this planned false flag alien invasion, which is really just a military industrial complex conning everybody. Now, and Chad goes, oh, there's all this escalation of tension in the Middle East. There's been escalation in the tension of the Middle East for my entire life. Do you know what I mean? It's like, the reality is
not new. Well, okay, so one quick little pin on that.
Sure.
I think that one prediction, again, they put it as a Trump era thing, and that Trump, again, the whole context of that particular prediction is Trump in his second term. So that's why it falls apart. But the idea, and again, there's an aspect of all this that I think we've talked about, which is the idea that the military industrial complex may fake UFO phenomena. And again, some in the Middle East, again, that's stuff I've talked about, right? And part of my book is saying, hey, I do think that when the Antichrist comes, there will be a fake UFO thing, that it will be in the Middle East. So, I mean, I'm right there. It's like that. Again, the problem is, though, congratulations, you've literally talked about you've said something that a dozen people for the last 40 years have discussed. You know, I mean,
I'm sympathetic to the false flag stuff, but all of the predictions were BS. Or one was kind of accurate, but who couldn't after that New York Times article and the media explosion then predict that there was going to be more coverage and the military being more forthcoming? It was obvious. That's not a prediction.
I talked about it. That was, again, I've been around for a while, just sort of on the QT, but guys, I've been talking about this literally since 2017. Technically, since before all that. I've been around since 2014 talking about this stuff. When 2017 happened, that was one of my big talking points. Is, guys, this was again, for me, it was a theological shot across the bow, and no one was responding. But I would have told you then it was happening. I predicted in 2014. I made more accurate predictions. Of course, I was using the Bible, but I made more accurate predictions about this than this dude did. So, again, yes,
my point is, Daniel David Skyfall, if that was his proof, should no longer be considered by Chad Caleck to be a legitimate source. And supposedly part of the next film, which hasn't been made yet, Paleface, is going to look more into Daniel David Skyfall's insider predictions. If they're all total BS, or if they're easy to predict and the rest are all BS, then, I mean, I would just throw that guy overboard. There's nowhere else to go with somebody who's been telling you who all of his predictions were a failure. So
obviously failed. Well, and here's the thing, like the entire, all of the information that both of these figures, again, for just to one more time, I'm assuming that that the filmmakers are working in good faith. Okay. I don't want somebody to say, "Hey, y'all are saying that he's lying." I don't think the filmmakers are operating in bad faith at all. Okay. So that having been said, I d- it for me the entire time I'm watching this film, again because I've been around this particular part of this phenomena for a long time. There's nothing in there you couldn't have pulled off of the internet from like 2000. Like, this is not new stuff. Everything on there was something you could pull. There wasn't anything that it's classified. No, it's not. I've seen this on a dozen websites for the last 30 years. Okay, probably before the 2000, it was probably on magazines and stuff like that. I'm just saying, none of this is new. This is all old stuff. All of it.
Mhm.
Every single story, every single theory, every single piece of scrap paper that they throw up there, I have seen 100 times in 100 different contexts. Nothing is new. So that's my again, another big problem with these next two films is they pin on these two individuals having this insider information.
Mhm. So much so that a lot of those second 2 films are just stock footage montages while Chad
Yeah,
reads the theories. I
right.
mean, the first film is very much a boots on the ground, they're doing things and filming and getting
Yeah,
footage from the
exactly.
Western Sydney paranormal team, but the second 2
Mhm.
films, there's an awful lot, which is just Chad with a voice filter reading the narrative, particularly in the second film, while they show stock footage,
Yeah,
supposedly somehow backing up the claims of Daniel
these
David
people.
Skyfall and the tattoo
Yeah.
faced man. And then the second film, of course, when we're talking about predictions, or the third film, when we're talking about predictions that are coming true, it's just a bunch of, clips from CNN and Fox News and interviews with President Trump and trying to piece it
Mhm.
together to make it seem like these predictions are being borne out
And
when
they're
of
not.
course they're not. Now, all of that said, there are a couple of points that Chad makes that I actually agree with. I don't
Yes.
imagine for a moment that Navy pilots were rolled out without approval of the Department of Defense to tell the stories
Yep.
about chasing vehicles which seem to operate beyond the capacity of anything we had. I
Right.
have a very hard time believing those guys all came forward themselves and the DoD were fine with it. Chad
Right.
goes so far as to say the DoD
Yes.
selected them, and that's very well possible. The DoD
Mhm.
certainly approved it, but you don't have
Oh,
people who are
absolutely.
top guns coming out and just
Mhm.
telling their stories about UFOs on cable news
Right.
if there's not an approval
Mhm.
from superiors. It's not the way it works.
Exactly. So, okay, so and I actually I've bashed them kind of I've bashed this whole concept long enough because again, it's the flaws are obvious. There's a few points though that I'm I not only am I sympathetic to, I think it's actually really really good. That they make several interesting points, but that's the first good one that I completely agree with you on that. It's like, hey, but the problem is I've made the point too, which is why I'm sympathetic to it. Right? There's no way these guys came out. And again, where'd they get the footage? Right? Someone just didn't like stick one of these big film canisters under their shirt and walk out, right? This was released by the DoD.
Yeah, this
This
was
was
controlled.
planned. It was
Mhm.
controlled. Again, I'm not about to say anything about any particular individuals who may or may not be very popular uh, on the nightly news when it comes to this kind of stuff, but I have trouble believing that people with the kind of with certain kind of inside information and contacts with the military are running around being this public about the phenomena unless this was designed, unless this was intended to get out there,
Mhm.
and this is again a controlled release. I've said for years, and I mean literally back in 2012, 2013.
Mhm.
I believe we're in the age of disclosure. The thing is, it's not everyone imagines the president is going to walk out one day and be like, "Hey, here's Klaatu," and the little green guy's like, "Nanu." That's not how this is going to work, right? It's now again for me, disclosure is a cover up. Like the disclosure itself is a false flag. It's a hoax. And that's sort of the next thing I kind of want to talk to or address since we're this far into the episode is again, I'm of the assumption, not the assumption, I'm of the belief because I think when you really kind of take that step back, that's really what it's leading to, right? Which is, I do think that the UFO phenomena, again, I do think there's legitimate aspects to it. I don't think they're aliens, but I think a large, huge percentage of it is the DoD and and probably even I'll even say it, globalists, that this is a phenomena that's being engineered to manipulate the people.
Well,
And that's a huge aspect of these two films, is
and
that
that's
idea.
and that's where disinfo or disinformation always works along those lines. And you're right, both you and I are sympathetic to the idea
Mhm.
of a false disclosure or the idea of the DoD releasing all of this stuff intentionally. So
Mhm.
obviously we're going to like those aspects of the film. But let's just say that we're right about that, that there may be a false disclosure one day. And
Mhm.
even if there isn't, because I'm also suspicious about there ever being a disclosure, there's certainly
Right.
controlled releases of this information.
Yeah.
And thirdly, I've always suspected that the Tic Tac videos are just our capturing something which is either our own technology or the videos themselves are a total hoax and are just to show us something for whatever reason, or
Yeah.
it's very difficult to tell what the purpose of some disinfo is. So all of those things
Right.
I'm on board with. I'm on board with the idea of the release of fake ET information,
Mhm.
and I'm on board with the idea that this is all controlled and all the releases aren't really whistleblowers. They're people who are getting confirmations. All of that said, perhaps, and I didn't even think of this till now, perhaps in a way, some of this is a disinfo operation. Again, not by the filmmakers, but by stuff
Right.
they're being fed. Because if this is controlled release of information, and if
Mhm.
maybe woe
Yeah.
betide there is a plan that when disclosure comes, it's just some bigger psyop and there's aren't really ETs, which if disclosure ever comes, that's going to be my suspicion, even though I don't think
Yeah.
disclosure's coming. But if it comes, I'm going to straight away go, this is some kind of military psyop, right? But
Right.
let's just assume that that's the reality, which I think we're both closer to. Then it gets very dirtied when you start saying, like this film does, but that false disclosure, that false alien invasion, that false flag alien invasion set up by the globalists, which is what Chad Caleck
Right.
calls them at one
Exactly.
stage, or
Yeah.
the military industrial complex, or the energy elites. He
Right.
uses all of these different terms. But that's just because they want to get the world unified before the real aliens invade, because they don't want the
Right.
aliens to give us free energy, because if they give us free energy, it's the end of the energy monopolies. And they're going to
Right.
fight these aliens with nuclear weapons and with back engineered sources and all of this nonsense. So we can see
Yeah.
how in there's something which makes some degree of sense. Fake releases of information,
Yeah.
controlled interviews with pilots who've been fed what to say, the release of Tic Tac videos, which might be capturing our own technology, perhaps even to intimidate enemy forces for all the devil I know. I don't know what the reason is, but that
Right.
all doesn't sound insane. But then when you start to put that in this broader picture that the real
Right.
aliens are still going to invade to give us free energy, and the globalists are doing this fake thing now to set us up so we're all unified by then to fight the aliens, the grains of truth in the middle start to become part, or at least what you and I suspect are the grain of truths in the middle. They start to
Right.
sound ridiculous. It's the same as
Yeah.
a David Icke lizard people conspiracy, right? I don't think it's
Right.
crazy to suggest that powerful people in the world have agendas which they don't want to be decided by democratically elected governments. That's not a crazy
Correct.
idea. But if you start to say those powerful people are really lizards from, with morphing capabilities and can change into giant
Right.
reptiles, the actual grain of truth just sounds ludicrous. It's like all of a sudden anybody who criticizes the powerful elite are crazy David Icke lizard people believers. It's the same with
Yeah.
this. Anybody who, if this became the popular way of looking at it, and you said,
Mhm.
well, I think this is all controlled releases, and I don't think
Right.
the Tic Tacs are extraterrestrial. It's just our technology. And somebody's seen this. It's like, oh
Right.
yeah, I've heard that, and then the aliens are really going to invade. Though, no, no, no. I'm not saying that. I'm not going to that
Right.
level of
Yeah.
absurdity.
Yeah. No, no, no. No, I completely agree. I think that's definitely a possibility here, because again, it goes back to, as we alluded to at the beginning of the show. Yes. I think that that the Sir No Face, which is the be being at the center of this whole conversation, again, I do not believe the filmmakers themselves are in on the hoax. I don't. I do think it was a hoax. The video was hoaxed, but again, I don't think it was even the people who took the film, right, that were there working. I think there's a third culprit that actually falls. And if you watch those second and third films, and I think this is really, for me, the bigger point here. It's like, again, assuming everyone is on the up and up as far as what they're saying is happening to them, they do point out that a lot of weird things happened with the Australian government right after that SIR NoFace footage was taken. They didn't pay. They were the paranormal group was supposed to be paid. Again, assuming that's true. Then and all of a sudden they didn't get paid. They got kicked off the island, and they started looking at some weird, again, military industrial complex sort of connections, which are legit. They are. Like, that is one of those things that's legit about this is the government is there. That, you know, the American and Australian militaries do have those connections. So if there is, and this is my thought on the whole Men in Black aspect, this is where all that ties together, where I'm very, very sympathetic to this particular idea that I think they're presenting, like you said, I think they go too far because they're listening to these other two people who may be deliberate plants or they may just be wackos. Because like that's a surprise. Anyway, we've never run across those at conventions. Is the idea that either the Australian, the American, or some combination thereof militaries are hoaxing this event, right? And this thing that happened, the SIR NoFace footage, is that it was hoaxed by that they have someone with probably a mannequin just, and that was it. So it's not the people, it's not the paranormal investigators, because the paranormal investigators tell a really interesting story, which is that they also suffer from missing time, right? They suffer from, that was when they started saying is, hey, we took all this as paranormal, but this is also kind of fits the UFO field. And on previous reviews of this film, I've always said I'm very sympathetic to that observation, right? Which is that, again, I say this all the time. I don't like it when Venn diagrams basically become circles, right? And it's a great example. It's like we have this supposedly paranormal hot spot. It's all ghosts and blah 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 blah. But then we have all this overlap with the UFO phenomena, missing time. There were other things that happened. So that's why they're like, man, we really needed to again in the second and third films. That's one of the things they focus on. And then you have the Men in Black. Well, again, if the military is in and hoaxing a lot of the UFO phenomena to begin with, then this whole thing could be a governmental setup, and the Men in Black are sent there to scare them, to kind of keep them in a direction, right? To keep them going in a particular direction, so they have this kind of story because it gives them almost it gives them that sense of, I'm doing the right thing, I'm going to stand up to the man. So it actually incentivizes them to do this story. And this is one of those things I think we need to realize, particularly just in general. Forget this film. If the government wanted you shut down, they would shut you down. If they didn't want you to come out with something, you wouldn't come out with it. If these Men in Black are showing up and they're not applying all of the screws, it's because they want you to tell this story. Trust me, there's plenty of reporters and we just saw one, who will, if they want you gone, you will disappear.
Well, in fairness too, just about the ET they supposedly filmed, the original SIR NoFace, they ultimately suggest that, kind of in the second one, right, that it might not be an ET, it might be some kind of biological robot created by the government which is going to be used in the fake alien invasion, and they want to see how people will respond to it. So they convince this paranormal team to come in and then get them used to dealing with an ET, and that was the whole purpose. Of course, a simpler explanation is that the management of Cockatoo Island, that yes, is a government facility, because again, they make a big deal in marketing these movies, the only paranormal investigation ever mandated by the Australian government. The reality is, from my understanding, is that Cockatoo Island, and I'm basing this solely on watching the films and reading between the lines, is at the start, the management of Cockatoo Island were interested in doing ghost hunting tours because they're a big deal. And so they picked up the phone book or went through the internet. Who's a big paranormal team? We can get them out to see the viability of this. They called them in. And then perhaps, maybe they shut it down. I don't know why the government shut it down. Maybe they shut it down because they saw that video and thought, well, this looks dodgy. I don't want people coming around doing dodgy
Right.
hoax videos. I mean, this is just another theory. I have
Oh, yeah.
no idea if that's true or not. And the whole thing that the Australian government never paid them, you're right, it's in there. It's a big deal's made about it. If you had a contract with the Australian government to pay you money to do a job, the Australian government, like any government in the West, isn't going to bail on that contract. I think there was an
Yeah.
assumption that they were going to get paid, and it was
Mhm.
not so much kind of a handshake deal, almost come in and see what you
Right.
think. And then they build Cockatoo Island, where we had 20 team members
Right.
out there or 10 team members out there, and we were there for, you know, 300 man hours, and we used this equipment, and here's your bill. And Cockatoo Island were like, we just thought you were coming out to check out the island and give us some advice.
Right.
You know, that could
Yeah.
quite possibly be it as well, rather than
Oh, no,
something
I
more
agree. Like,
conspiratorial.
don't get me wrong. I'm right there with you. I'm just, again, for the sake of the conversation, I think it's easier just to sort of work from that perspective of they're being forthright. Again, the easiest assumption on this is just to think that the whole thing's being hoaxed and that they know what's actually happening here. That's the easiest assumption. And I'm going to be honest, it's real hard not to come to that conclusion. Honestly, watching the films, it's hard not to come to that conclusion. I am simply trying to give everyone in the film the benefit of the doubt that they are not trying to be, that they're not lying, that they are not hoaxing, that this is all on the up and up as far as what's happening to them. Because you're right. The problem is if you watch the films, it's very easy to walk away and say, okay, these guys are deliberately hoaxing. I'm just trying not to say that. I want to. I think I want to give them. I want to give everyone in the film the benefit of the doubt but the problem is they do kind of make a lot of stretches where stretches don't need to occur. Like you said, the first film, the whole he wasn't really a rugby player. He's lying to me. There's CGI. He doesn't know anyone who does CGI. He's lying to me. And it's like they were the worst. Like they were the assassination attempt was such a. I'm sorry. Like watch, I was like, okay, this is actually kind of interesting. I see where this could be a thing. Like, what's going on here? And then you find out it's just some dude who was off committing, who was just having. I'm like, you're in LA. There's gunfire every 35 seconds in
That's
LA.
true.
Some crazy dude goes and commits suicide, and that's your. It's like they wound this, and they even said it's like, well, at first this is what I was thinking. Then we found out it was this, but they drug that out, and it's like, man, you're pulling real hard for this,
Yeah,
right?
I'll give a fair interpretation along those lines. Historically, when people start looking at weird stuff and start taking it seriously,
Mhm.
I think something psychologically happens to you. I think you become more paranoid and you see more meaning. It's like if you get interested in the
Yeah.
number 23 or 1111, you're going to start noticing
Yeah.
it all the time. If
Oh,
you think you're
absolutely.
being watched and followed and you're on a hit list,
Right.
you're going to see things which might just be something you wouldn't even have thought about 2 years ago having anything to do with, your
Right.
status as a UFO investigator. An example as well is when Chad's phone, he goes on there and there's a file for 46 seconds of him having an argument with his wife, and he thinks that means something. Now, I don't know what that means because he said he
Right.
didn't record the phone conversation, and he doesn't even say what it means, but I think the implication is that people are
Correct.
recording messages from his phone. But I mean, phones are weird. I don't like all this, Alexa and voice technology, but if I do the wrong
Right.
thing, my computer will start, flashing, how can I help you? Do you know what I mean? It's like,
Yeah.
I don't want to hear Siri asking me questions. So we all
Right.
know technology. So my point is,
Yeah.
10 years ago, Chad mightn't have thought anything of that. But when he's neck deep in this massive conspiracy theory, which he's believing from
Yeah.
Daniel David Skyfall and a tattoo face man, something weird happens, it's easy to turn to that and go, oh, they must be listening.
Right.
And in fairness, there are other things a
And
little
that's
bit
fair.
weirder than that he puts forward
yeah.
as well. Like somebody streaming onto his television footage of somebody recording outside of his apartment building. That's
Right.
pretty weird. If that happened, that's a little weirder
Yeah.
than the phone being recorded.
Again, like
Recorded,
again, that's what I'm saying. I want to work from the assumption that they are being forthright about this stuff because that's the kind of part where I'm like, okay, that gives everything else legitimacy. Again, the gunshot thing was a little, again, for me, I'm like, y'all feel like I feel like y'all are stretching that when you have that story. Like, again, someone's putting on your television that they're filming your house. That's freaky.
Yeah,
And
that is
to a
freaky.
point,
In fairness, that's freaky.
and to a point, and I'm actually going to be very sympathetic on the whole. you have this voice file on your phone that you did. Knowing what I know about what goes on with this bull crap, like that. Honestly, I'm of the opinion, like, yeah, I think that's like, I think the forget the conspiracy. Like, if there wasn't the rest of the context of it, I'd be right there with you. Like, there's an easier explanation. Like, it's just you touched something wrong. However, because of the broader context, I think it is fair for him to assume somebody did something. So again, working from the assumption that they are being forthright about this, I do think that's a legitimate reason to be freaked out about all this.
Mhm.
But again, for me, I go back to it. Then it feels like y'all are being manipulated to put this out by
That's a good
the
point.
government. Like, I think that, so again, working from the assumption, note that that's all being forthright. It's then, yeah, if that's really the takeaway I take from this whole trilogy so far, is y'all are being actively manipulated to put these things out because they know you will. And they're giving you just in the things that they do to you are just scary enough to give you, and just weird enough to give it viability and to give it credibility. And I think this is, I mean, for me, the broader part of all this is, like I said, if the government doesn't want you to say something, you will disappear. Like, you will legitimately vanish. They have ways of doing it. And we've seen it happen we've seen it
Oh,
happen to
yeah.
people.
There
So,
are there are real conspiracy researchers like Danny Casolaro, like
oh
Jim
yeah.
Keith, who die in weird and there's I mean,
Hmm.
we don't need to go politically, but there's one political
Hmm.
family which has a list of people that have died involved
It's,
with them, a mile long. So
yeah.
people are whacked all the time, I think, and not necessarily by the government, but by various vaguely governmental, non-governmental forces. I mean, the history of organized crime has
Oh
whackings out the
yeah.
yin yang. The history of secret societies has whackings out the yin yang. So
Oh yeah.
yeah, if they want you dead, you're right. I think there's no doubt you're going to be dead. I don't think there's going to be
Yeah.
somebody shooting at you outside your apartment building, but really committing suicide, on the beach 10 minutes later. And regarding that, I'm assuming if you were shot at, and this is, I don't know, because you can't
Right.
assume what somebody's going to think, but I would have thought that Chad would have called the police and there'd be a police report saying, if
Yeah.
somebody, and I'm not somebody who calls the police very easily, but if somebody shot at me outside my house, that would be a
Hmm.
time I would actually call the police and say, "Hey, somebody
Oh
just
yeah.
took a shot at me," right?
Oh, absolutely.
That's not like going, "Oh, I don't wanna call," I don't wanna call the police, it's no big deal. If somebody takes a shot at you, so I would assume then there would be a police report that would be shared on the video. And now I'm being you're
Yes.
the kinder one, I'm the super suspicious one.
Right.
But I just find it difficult to believe if you really thought somebody had made an assassination attempt on you, that you wouldn't have called the police there and then, and there wouldn't be a police report saying, "We went out there,
Mhm.
there was a bullet hole in the wall,"
Yeah.
the person, or even the person said a couple of shots had been taken at him, I mean,
Yeah. I mean, again, like I said, I, and again, I keep saying this because I don't want it to sound like I'm being disingenuous. It's just, it's really, honestly, it would be very easy just to say all of this is, Raptor, you can just email them. Things are in the doobly doo below. Um, Website, go to the website. You can mention that. Exactly, Vincent. That's sort of my whole point is, I mean, we've seen reporters vanish, right? People do disappear. And I have my, every time I hear the following sentence, men in black or people from the government or whatever, and they make a call and they hang up, or they send you this weird email. Like, I've gotten weird calls from people claiming to be FBI agents, right? And of course I follow up, and it's like, this is some, the phone number is some guy from, or it's some abandoned warehouse in Washington D.C. So it's the right sort of zip code.
gosh.
I mean, yeah, I mean, I'm sorry, if you do this long enough, you'll have these weird calls, right? My I tend to look at it and say, if the government really wanted you to shut up, what would happen is someone would come in the middle of the day to your place of business, your home, whatever they know you are. A bunch of people come out and say, "Hey, we need to talk to you downtown." They're gonna flash the FBI, NSA, whatever they have in Australia. They're gonna take you to a room. They're gonna be like, "You're going to shut up right now. Here's an NDA. Here's why, and here's the pictures of you and the goat." Like, they're gonna just, right. You're not gonna get a call It's going to be like, I'm Bob Smith from the FBI, and
Mm.
you better not show that picture, or I'm from the government. And then they're in a t-shirt and jeans, and like, I'm from the. You better not make that film. The film's already out. You better not make that film. We're making certain, and then you just run away. Like that
Agreed.
isn't how that works.
You know
Right?
what's interesting, though? In the history of UFO belief and UFO researchers, a lot of people have talked about the UFO silencers. You know,
Right.
people who try to. So who knows if this phenomena. John
Yeah.
Keel would have suggested that none of this was government. John Keel would have suggested that this was
Right.
part of the phenomena, the same way the Mothman isn't government, or that Indra Cold himself getting out of the source that talked to Woody Derenberger isn't the government. Keel would have seen this as part of the same process. Jacques Vallée would have suggested, in books like Messengers of Deception, that this might be some type of human agency or human force, but it wasn't necessarily a government one. So again, to give the benefit of the doubt, could there be some UFO silencer, either human or non-human or non-government force? Maybe.
Right.
Maybe.
Well, and so again, I'm working from the assumption that everything that's being presented is that they're working in good faith. Okay, like I said, I do that. My only suggestion is I think that these things that are happening are designed to actually steer them in a direction. And let's even go with the Skyfall guy and the tattooed man, right? Assuming they aren't just some random schizophrenics. Yes, that's a big assumption. Then honestly, because even Skyfall claims to be a disinformation agent. That's his whole point. He's like, I'm giving you the inside scoop because I am on the inside. I do this stuff for a living where I'm actually manipulating people. And I'm like, that should be your number one red flag. It's like they're already telling you what they are. Just okay. Why is this a problem? Like,
Yeah, this and in fairness, this has happened in the UFO community as well in America. You have to look at the AFOSI operations against people like Paul Benowitz and Linda Moulton Howe
right.
back in the late 70s and 80s. There was legitimate information. Well, when I say legitimate information was shared with UFO researchers and people with an interest in UFOs, which was total BS, or at least maybe there was a grain of truth in it, but we know enough of it was BS not to take the whole story seriously. So could that be happening to Chad and to Craig as well? Of course it could be.
Yeah. No, that's sort of the assumption that I'm working from is that that they're being handled, right? And I think they don't understand that they're being handled. Again, I'm being generous.
Interestingly, neither of them are UFO guys, right? Neither of, not that would make a difference, because there's lots of UFO researchers that are so grateful to think they've got any information given to them by a higher source that they go down those crazy rabbit holes. We know that's a part of the broader history of UFO community as well. But if you're from the paranormal realm, you're not used to the idea of misinformation. If you're well read on the history of UFO belief and the UFO community since the 1950s onwards, you're aware that there's been an awful lot of manipulation handed and perpetrated against these people. Maybe if your background's paranormal, you're like, wow. Instantly you don't even think that this fits a pattern of BS.
Okay. Yes, I agree. There's I would argue the qualification you gave is kind of a much larger one than you realize. However, to your point, I completely agree. And here's the other aspect to all this that I think for me gives me a little bit of it allows me to lean into this a little bit and think, okay, they're being honest here, which is post 2016. What have we seen in the whole ancient alien movement, right? The ancient astronaut theory movement and the UFO movement is that there is a move towards the paranormal, right? To the new age, to this sort of away from aliens in a metallic craft from another planet to things start getting really, sort of mystical very, very quickly post 2016, right? And
Horace has a good point. Horace says, but should the audience accept the assumption of good faith? That seems a fundamental question. I think Horace is right. We're probably just being conscious of litigation. So
I'm not. So yes, that is exactly what I'm doing. But okay, so hold on. But let me respond to Horace real quick on that one because yes, part of this is just for the sake of the conversation. that I'm making this assumption. I think it's fair if you walk away from this and you're like, these guys are scammers. That's fair. However, I tend to, the only reason, again, in a broader sense, I think the problem is I've seen a little too much go really weird, really fast in the world, and it looks like, again, this is sort of my broader point with the whole, since 2016, we've seen this move into the more paranormal. And I don't think that's by accident. I don't think the move from traditional, got into trouble for calling the aliens Klingons. Yesterday. I don't think that the move from Klingon to Casper, so to speak, in the field, I just don't think that's been a coincidence. I think that's been a very deliberate move. And that's why this weird paranormal connection first for that first film, and where all this, that becomes sort of the contact point for all the rest of this, that feels a little legitimate to me. Like I said, honestly, I think if you walk away from these films thinking that that these people are just making up a story, I do not think that there's anyone who could condemn you for that. Again, for the sake of this conversation, I'm simply working from the assumption that they're not, only for the sake of the episode.
Well, listen. In fairness, filmmakers aside, you're right. I'm happy to say that the information from Daniel David Skyfall, his predictions have proven to be BS. Trump was not chosen for 2 terms. Trump did not, when he was president, make an announcement of alien disclosure. So that anything that's in those films from that person now, which incidentally makes up an awful lot of the theory of the second 2 films, should just be thrown overboard.
Oh, exactly.
Should just be thrown overboard. Precisely. So what's left then of those films? The experiences that Craig had with the Men in Black and waking up outside in the cold, abandoned field or the vacant field next to his house, and the strange things that happened to Chad regarding his phone. That's all that, or the broadcast of the video, whatever, to his TV. Yeah. Take out the Daniel David Skyfall and the weird. If somebody, no offense to people with tattoos, if some guy approaches me who has face tattoos and is covered in tattoos and hands me a folder on the truth of extraterrestrial visitation, I'm going to take it with a big grain of salt. Do you know what I mean? Right. Well, and if somebody sends me emails and then I ask for proof and the predictions all turn to be BS, then I'm just going to throw it overboard as well. So when you take those 2 sources out, there's not an awful lot except a few strange encounters left in those last 2 movies, which sure, they're interesting anecdotes, but they don't prove some massive government conspiracy which is getting us ready for a fake alien invasion to herald in the real alien invasion, so we're globally united to fight the ETs. And that's the message of the second 2 films.
Correct. No, correct. The message, I think, is obviously bunk. And to the point I made very early in the episode, all the stuff that they're presenting, all of the evidence, is all stuff that's been publicly available for decades at this point. I mean, there's nothing about any of this that's remotely new or unique or unusual. I mean, the whole Skyfall thing he talks about in the 3rd film, where it's like they've done something to the atmosphere. I'm like, okay, I'll admit I'm not a meteorologist. I'm going to call BS in the whole thing. Now, that being said, it was, again, the footage they show looks kind of scary. I still have to ask if it's real, right? Again, not suggesting that they.
Well, that was footage that Skyfall sent him, right? Daniel David Skyfall sent him all those clips that he played.
Right, exactly. I mean, the problem that like I said, the problem I have with these 2 characters that they bring in, assuming the filmmakers are being honest, is that this is every schizophrenic person that's been like, I've got the secret information, and it's all video clips and things from stuff I know or from movies or things that have been around for 20 years, but he's given this photograph a completely different context, or this film a completely different context. And it's like, I know what this is. Like, why are you sending this to me? And it's not like I'm the only one that this happens to. Trust me, we all of us get these things. These people, they believe, and they're sending you stuff from movies. And it's like, I know what this is. Like, it's from Jurassic World. I watched the movie. I saw the ads. Dude, I cannot tell you how many people I had sending me footage. And it's like, because they did that I guess what was it, the found footage stuff where it's like, hey, here's people taking footage of these dinosaurs in the real world. It was put out by the movie. It was on their website. It was used to promote the freaking movie. I actually like the movie, this third one. But someone, as I beat my poor laptop to death, apparently, but someone would take it and like my favorite one was the mosasaur, because someone actually took it and like chopped it up so it looked like it was sort of one of those, like, every second a photograph kind of underwater cameras. So it looked like that's what it was, like one of these security cameras. And I'm like, dude, this is part of the Jurassic World 3 promotional. But they swore up and down this was a real thing. So my problem is these two characters, to me, sounds like every schizophrenic nut job I've ever run across. And so it's, to your point, they don't even need to be disinformation agents. They just need to be whack jobs that he's pulling for content. And like you said, assuming these other events are real, I could understand maybe why they're willing to believe these people. Like you said, Skyfall should be entirely out of the conversation considering what's happened since 2020. But, I mean, that is what it is. Again, to Horace's point, if you walk away from these films thinking that this is a scam, I would never, ever, ever hold that against you. I'm just going to be willing to give them the benefit of the doubt to the point that they are being they're being honest as far as what's happening to them. In which case, I think they're being manipulated by whatever entities out there doing it. But this is not, like you said, I don't think it's the government actually trying to shut them up. They're being manipulated to put this out so that people will believe them, and probably, to your point, to create the false, the real alien stuff, right? That's to discredit everything else that's being discussed or being presented. I think it's to discredit the grain of truth that's actually in there.
Yeah, it's strange times anyway. Well, I
Yeah.
enjoyed chatting with you about these
yeah.
films. We don't often talk about our thoughts of the books or the films or the articles beforehand. So I didn't know if I was going to come to this and Jason was going to be, this is the biggest revelation in the history of cinema. But no, I
Yes.
should have known we'd see it pretty much on the same.
I honestly thought, because I knew you were gonna tear this thing apart, and I'm like, should I play devil's advocate just for the content? Because I could really milk this hard, but I couldn't. Because again, I want everyone to know, again, y'all, I love y'all. I want to make certain that y'all understand that I'm never going to lie to y'all, right? We're here to tell y'all what we really think about all these things and really about ultimately the phenomena. And in many ways, a lot of this is just, these are the vehicles to discuss these things, right? These books, these articles, these films are as the vehicle to have that broader overall conversation. So never going to lie to y'all. And again, the reason I kept saying, assuming these people are being honest, is because it's so easy not to. But, the simple fact of the matter is I would like to work from the assumption. I try to give everyone the benefit of the doubt until I have reason not to. But I think if I didn't give them that benefit of the doubt, this episode would have been over like at the 10-minute mark. After I ranted about the aesthetics of the echo, I swear, again, in all love to the filmmakers, I really do mean this. Please stop with the echo. Like 3 times. Rule of 3, people. Rule of 3. Find the 3 really good one at the beginning, one in the first quarter, one midway through, and one at the end. Please, for the love of my sanity, just keep it to 3. I cannot. And then he ordered coffee. No, I don't. It's not important. It's not important that you got it. And I got an email. No, stop it. No. But
on
anyway,
a different note, something just banged on my roof. Maybe it was the ETs or the Mothman just banging on my roof. It's always interesting when you do a show like
could
this.
you stop? We spent a lot of time manipulating these people. Could you stop?
If I did, if I was making a movie, I'd be going, and we were talking about the Sir NoFace case, and then something banged on my roof. The next morning, I woke up and I thought I'd lost an hour while I was sleeping. What happened?
Yeah, it happened.
So coincidences can go a long way to making sense of things which don't need necessarily having sense made of.
That's true. The Wendigo is probably out there being like, "You're going 20 minutes long, Dean. I still have hauntings to get to."
I am in the North Woods. It's possible.
So, see,
could have been a cat on my roof. Overbuilt automotive probably was.
No, it is the Wendigo. Oh, don't lie to him. You know it's the Wendigo, guys.
In Wendigo territory.
Love y'all. We're gonna jump out of here. Yeah, he's in Wendigo territory. He's going to go get mauled by the Wendigo. I will be here probably by myself next week on that case. You know what? We can't get better than that.
Pine Island Research says on my roof. On my roof.
That's why I was, yes. For those who are listening, yes. Pine Island Research wins the night. In Mothman 46, Dean is getting a visit from the Black-Eyed Kids. Black-Eyed Kids. Well, we'll see those Black-Eyed Kids behind the stacks. We'll see y'all next week, guys. Bye.